This episode is sponsored by Trade Coffee. Take Trade Coffee's personalization quiz and receive a selection of coffees that match your tastes and preferred brewing methods, all in Trade's compostable packaging. Right now, Trade is offering a total of $20 off your first 3 bags when you go to drinktrade.com/Babish. That's 16 cups for free. Take the quiz and start your journey to the perfect cup. The link is in the video description. Alright, so today we're making 3 different kinds of babka, and for each we're going to make the same base babka dough. Into the bowl of a stand mixer goes 550 grams of all-purpose flour, tiny whisk together with 2.5 teaspoons of instant yeast. Then in a separate bowl we're combining 2/3 of a cup of milk warmed to 80 to 90 degrees Fahrenheit with 2 large eggs, 55 grams of granulated sugar, and 2 teaspoons of kosher salt, optionally adding 1 teaspoon of vanilla paste if you're making a sweet babka. Add that to the stand mixer along with 140 grams of unsalted butter at room temperature, and set about kneading with a dough hook for 6 to 8 minutes once everything is combined. In the end, you should have a smooth, bouncy dough that just barely passes the window pane test. This recipe makes 2 loaves, so we're going to divide that dough in half. Then I'm going to laminate each piece, that is, roll it out and fold it into thirds to try to get it into a more rectangular shape. Then ideally we're going to wrap it in plastic wrap and fridge it overnight, but if you want same-day babka, you can place it in a covered bowl and let it rise at room temperature for 1 hour. Next up, we need to make our filling, and I'm going to start with cinnamon. Into a large bowl goes 250 grams of brown sugar, 30 grams of all-purpose flour, 2 tablespoons of ground cinnamon, and a half teaspoon of kosher salt. Once combined, I'm adding 140 grams of unsalted melted butter, along with 1 large egg white for structure. Set that aside, fetch your dough, and generously flour your work surface, upon which we're going to roll out our dough to a roughly 9 by 15 inch rectangle. This can vary depending on your loaf pan. You want it as wide as your loaf pan is, and as long as you want there to be layers in your babka. Did that make any sense? No? Just roll it out. I don't know. Then we're spreading out half of our cinnamon mixture on our dough, reserving the other half for the second loaf. If you didn't add enough butter, like I did, it can be difficult to spread out, so I put little gobs all over the dough like this, spreading into a thin, even layer using an offset spatula or butter's knife, leaving maybe a ½ inch border on the outside edge of the dough. Now we're going to optionally rotate the dough 90 degrees so the audience can see what you're doing, and then roll up the dough nice and tightly long ways. Is that what you call this? Lengthwise? Widthwise? You see what I'm doing. Pinching the end of the dough together with the roll to seal it shut. Then we need to slice this guy in half cleanly, so we're going to pop him in the freezer for 15 minutes. Then we have to thoroughly prepare our loaf pan. There's a lot of sugar in this loaf that's going to melt out and turn into caramel, so we need lots and lots of melted unsalted butter brushed over every single square inch. You can also line the pan with a piece of parchment paper for easier retrieval. Now our loaf emerges from the freezer slightly firmer than it was before, so we can cut it in half cleanly lengthwise. I used that word correctly. Then I'm going to press and squeeze out each length so it's a little bit longer, line them up parallel, and press their ends together with the heel of my hand, making sure the dough is kind of sealed together before I start twisting the 2 ends around each other, trying to keep the cut side facing upward as I form the loaf. Once the dough's been twisted together, we're going to seal the other end the same way with the palm of our hand, pressing and smearing and tucking it underneath the loaf to make sure that it doesn't come apart during baking. And then if you want an extra layer of crunchy sugar on the outside of your loaf, you can line the pan with brown sugar. I think this works especially well with the cinnamon iteration, the citeration. Now we're going to tuck the loaf into the pan, trying to push the ends down and the center up, covering it with a moist, clean kitchen towel and letting it rise at room temperature for 1 hour, or until roughly doubled in size. While that rises, for this loaf we're going to make a streusel, combining 85 grams of light brown sugar, 60 grams of all-purpose flour, and a ½ teaspoon of kosher salt in a small bowl. Mix up the dry boys until they're homogeneous, and then we're going to add 40 to 50 grams of melted unsalted butter. This should form a crumbly sort of wet sand mixture that we can then sprinkle generously over the top of our risen loaf. Place this guy onto a rimmed baking sheet to catch any errant drops, pop them into a preheated 350 degree Fahrenheit oven for 45 to 55 minutes until deeply browned and its thickest point registers 185 degrees Fahrenheit. Let it cool in the pan for 10 minutes before letting it cool completely on a wire rack, at least 2 hours. Slice in and serve. Now this guy didn't end up with as many layers as I ideally would have liked. This can be solved by rolling out the dough a little bit longer than 15 inches, making, you guessed it, more layers. But it's still totally awesome. Cinnamon sweet, spicy, soft, crunchy, the works. But what about the classic chocolate babka? For that, in a double boiler we need to melt 190 grams of chopped dark chocolate at 115 grams of unsalted butter room temperature. Once totally melted but not overheated, we're going to take it off the heat, add 80 grams of powdered sugar, 35 grams of unsweetened cocoa powder, ½ teaspoon of cinnamon, and a ¼ teaspoon of kosher salt. Mix that together into a spreadable paste, and then from there it's the same procedure as before. Spread half the mixture out onto half of our dough, roll up, freeze, cut, twist, rise, and bake. This time the only difference being once it comes out of the oven, while it's still hot, we're going to brush it down with simple syrup. which is going to help give the loaf its characteristic burnished sheen. You could also make this one with the streusel if you wanted, or you could dust it with powdered sugar before serving, or just slice it up as is. And there you have it, a loaf as social media ready as it is delicious. But what about savory babka? You heard me right. This time in a bowl, we're combining 225 grams or 1 block of cream cheese with 60 grams of unsalted butter, both softened with 3 tablespoons of everything bagel seasoning. This is going to make a soft, spreadable mixture that we can, spread on our babka like the other stuff, treating it the exact same all the way up to the point of baking. This time we're going to brush our guy down with a beaten egg, both for color and to adhere more everything bagel seasoning that we're going to sprinkle generously over top. Pop this guy in the oven for the same amount of time until the same internal temperature is reached, and you'll end up with what is decidedly not a traditional babka, but one that is extremely, extremely delicious. About as wonderful a thing to snack on in the morning as ever there was. In fact, I'd say all we need now is a delicious cup of coffee from today's sponsor. Thank you again to Trade Coffee for sponsoring this episode. Trade has a massive amount of high-quality coffees from the nation's top roasters, customized to your preferences and continually evolving to suit your taste. With their quick and easy quiz, you'll be matched with the roasters and beans that best suit your brewing practices. My favorite coffee in this shipment was the Almost Soulmate Medium Roast, with notes of milk chocolate, clementine, and candied walnuts. Trade is offering $20 off your first 3 bags of coffee when you go to drinktrade.com/Babish. That's more than 16 cups for free. Head to the link in the video description.